Hello, 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 everybody. It is I, Senfeng Lim, and I'm here today with Heather O'Neill, and we are going to go through a whole bunch of stuff. But before we get there, I'm going to introduce the program. I'll do a little intro for Heather, and we'll get good. Just so you remember what this is all about, this is for the Tabletop Mentorship Program, which is a program that is run in order to help people kind of break into the business of tabletop, whether it is role-playing games, whether it's card and board, whether it's any of those things. We want to help people level up their abilities to create, to sell, to create content for, to be editors, to be videographers, whatever you want to do in the tabletop industry. We have somebody, most likely, able to mentor you. So people who are part of the industry already, or people who are just really skilled in that area and do this as a side gig or a hobby or whatever. And so we'd love for you to come and join the Tabletop Mentorship Program in the future. If you aren't in this round, if you are in this round and you're watching, great. I hope you're learning a lot. Something you can do to help the Tabletop Mentorship Program be more than what it is today is join our Patreon. So if you go to www.patreon.com and look up Tabletop Mentorship Program, this whole Patreon helps us keep the program going. And there is a video shout out level on Patreon. So if you want to get sign up for that level, then I'll be shouting you out on the videos when we make them. And that is super fun. So basically, yeah, we're just waiting for people to join the stream. And we see some people in the stream. That's great. I want you to know before we get started that we're going to run with Heather talking for a while, and then we'll do Q&A. So you can ask your questions in chat on the comment section during the talk that she's giving, and I'll bring them up later on in the Q&A section. So we're not going to interrupt Heather while she's speaking, but later on, we'll bring up all those questions that you asked. We'll bring them right onto screen. It'll be great. It'll be wonderful. So without further ado, let's introduce Heather. So Heather today is going to be giving us an A to Z, because I'm Canadian, guide on getting your RPG to market. So Heather's going to focus on all sorts of things. She has a wealth of information as part of Ninth Level Games and other projects that she's a huge part of. And this is sort of the business and production side, not the design side, of getting your RPG to people, right? Whether it's going to be through Drive-Thru RPG, itch.io, whether it's going to be Kickstarting or whatever, or you doing Zine Quest and making a small product first, which is often a very smart thing to do, by the way. Heather's going to have some information because I think she's been involved at all of those levels of various things, from like the indie stuff where it's like, hey, come look at my stuff, all the way up to like Kickstarters that have made hundreds of thousands of dollars and are going out to lots and lots of people. So Heather will talk to you all about that. So Heather is the CEO of Ninth Level Games, which is an indie TTRPG company, which is kind of basically everybody who's not WotC, right? And everybody who's not maybe
Pathfinder. Yeah, exactly. We're not making D&D, but otherwise everyone's indie. Yes.
Yeah, everybody's indie. So she's been in the gaming industry for about 10 years and has designed games, developed games, published games, done all the business stuff required to get something from here to here to there, to other people, right? Because a game really isn't a game until other people are playing it. And so Heather is going to be talking about all that stuff. She is one of the managing directors of UNPUB, which is a great organization to get involved with if you're looking to play test your games. The Unpublished Game Network is what that stands for, and a member of the Game Makers Guild of Philadelphia. In her free time, which she has very little of, Heather likes to play tennis, watch comedies, hang out with friends, and travel. Did I get it all, Heather?
You got it all. You did my work for me. Thank you.
There you go. So, Heather, I'm going to leave it all up to you. I'm going to take myself out of the feed, and you're going to be the grand poobah of the whole thing. You ready to go?
Sounds good.
All right. Without further ado, everybody, here is Heather O'Neill.
Thank you, Sen. Hi, everyone. As Sen said, I'm the CEO of Ninth Level Games, and we've made things from a very, very small game all the way up to hardcover books, like Zen said, that have huge print runs. But today, I'm mostly going to talk about bringing your RPG to market, and we're going to be talking more in the smaller end of things. What is basically the way you can get something out there? That's mainly what I'm going to be talking about. We will dip into a couple of different levels of options for things, but mostly it's going to be, I have this idea, I just want to get it out there, I just want to kind of get my first start. And Sen had mentioned actually that it's a really good idea to sometimes start with something small, and I agree with that as well. It's much easier to put out something small and short and cheaper to make for your first item to sell. So if that is something that you're thinking about doing and you've got, you know, a 400-page hardcover, maybe that's not the one that you start with. Maybe you've got a second idea, and that would be my suggestion for where you start. Like Sen also mentioned, but just as a reminder, this entire talk is not about what game you should make, how to make the game, layout, design, not anything about that. We're going to assume you're handling that, but maybe you're at the point where you want to get it out there and you don't know what your next step is. So I'm going to be talking mostly about what do you do with this finished product sitting there and how do you get it out there. So the things I'm going to be talking about are actually publishing that product, where you're going to sell it, how you're going to fulfill it to the customer once it's sold, and then a little bit about marketing and sustaining all of this, and a little bit about, you know, how much money you can expect to make doing all of this. Spoiler alert, it's not much. So publishing the product, you've all heard of indie TTRPG publishers, or I'm an indie press, or I'm an indie publisher. But maybe you don't actually understand what that means, because it's a very vague term that could go all the way up from I make 10,000 copies a year to I photocopy a couple things at Staples. Okay, that's still a publisher if you're the one doing it and you're the press group putting it out. So first, I just want to mention that a lot of people say, well, I'm not really a designer, I'm not really a publisher. Well, actually, you are. It's just a scale difference in how many things you're making. So you've got this product, you want to put it out there, you've got a couple of options. And your first simplest option is to do it digitally. So if you're going to do something digitally, the cost is low, it's probably more on your time. So that's one option. Your other option is to do something print on demand, where there's a digital option available and some people could choose to pay a little more and get the physical book shipped to them. Again, that's a one step up from digital in commitment and in money. And then, of course, going to an actual physical printing of the book or zine, and however many that ends up being is the top end on cost, and probably a little bit more risky to do that. So for digital, sure, if you're involved in games in any way, you may have heard of these places, but I'm going to say them anyway. As a solo RPG company or designer, you can list your games on itch or .io or on DriveThruRPG, and it doesn't require anything more than that. You put it through their system, they do basically a check to make sure that it's, you know, valid for their system, and it's for sale. It's the easiest option by far. It's the simplest way to get it out there. Really, it's only going to cost you a small percentage that they take their cut. And of course, your time to lay the book out and everything, which you would have been doing, and the time to put it into their system. But once it's up there, you pretty much don't have to do anything, and it is available for sale. You can share the link, people can discover it in their search engines, and it is out there. So that is by far the easiest way to say, hey, I'm getting my game out in the world. Even when people do printings, and I'm sure you've seen this if you've been on any of these sites, they also list it on itch and DriveThru. So it doesn't mean that you can't ever do a print version, but if you feel, okay, I really don't have any cash to print anything, the best option for you would be to digitally list your game on itch or DriveThruRPG. All right, now let's say people are starting to hear about your game and ask you, hey, I would like to have a printed version, or you really are excited that you want to see this in print. Now you have to decide, okay, am I going to do a print on demand, or am I going to physically print multiple copies of this game? So print on demand is not something that is available on a lot of sites. I know DriveThruRPG does it. I'm pretty sure itch does not do it. And I'm not sure what other sites actually do this, but I'm sure there has to be other ones. And what this means is you have your digital product for sale, but someone could choose to pay more and get that book shipped to them directly. And what that means for you as the publisher and designer, and for the DriveThruRPG people selling this, is there's no stock of this game sitting there. It is only going to be printed once someone clicks buy. So when they say, I'm going to buy this, now the process starts, and it might take, I don't know, however many weeks to get to that person. You're going to see, they're going to take more of a cut probably. You're going to see a little less than you would have if you printed a whole bunch yourself. But yet again, you didn't have to really do anything. You don't have to fulfill that book, and you don't have to pay a whole bunch of money to have stacks of these books sitting around. So if you're in this in between where you really, really, really want a physical book, but you just don't have the cash or the space or the ability to hold a lot of stock, this could be a really good option where you could buy some yourself to have a few on hand, maybe 5, 10, and then just allow the sales to come through directly. Again, like I said, there's time involved with setting it up. I've heard it can kind of be a pain, and they do take a cut, but yet again, it's still so much easier and less expensive than doing the entire print run yourself, regardless of however many you do. It's still going to be a little bit of a cheaper option for you and a little less risky of an option to do something like that. So that's kind of your mid-range. You're not quite sure if you're ready to commit to a print run, or you don't want to just do digital. This would be your best option, is to do print on demand. And then, of course, you want to maybe do a full physical print run. So a physical print run is a vague term, because that could mean 100 books. It could mean 1,000 books. It could mean 10 books, right? So it really depends on how you're getting those made. So you can do a very, very, very small print run yourself, DIY, at the local FedEx, Kinko's, or Staples, or another local printer, and you can have them printed off. You hand fold them and staple the zines. That's still a print run, right? But it's a very, very small print run. And that's not going to be the same as a print run that you hear of, like, we're out of stock, they'll say, on something like Root the RPG, or Thirsty Sword Lesbians, or D&D or something. Those are going to be a lot more, and they're going to take a lot of time, maybe 1,000, 5,000 units. That's a different type of print run that we're talking about. There's usually minimums involved. It's usually not on a zine, saddle stitch type of product. So the print run can mean a lot of things, but typically when we're talking about an RPG, we're talking a zine, let's say, we're talking about a saddle stitch book. So something kind of like this, right? So it's fairly small. The middle is stitched like with some staples. That's pretty much what an RPG zine is expected. Now you might say, hey, I've got a lot more pages than that. Well, that's okay. You can do like a perfect bound book, right? Which is a little bit more like that. So it's still not a ton of pages. This one's 74 pages, but it's too big to be stapled, right? And when you're kind of at that point where you're going from, I have my digital manuscript and I'm debating how this is going to come out, that's less important if you're doing it digitally. If you're doing it digitally, it's digital. It doesn't matter if it's 4 pages or 400 pages. I mean, the price will change, but other than that, that's a file, right? Print on demand, again, you're going to set what that price is and it's going to be handled. But a physical print run, you really need to think about, okay, this product is going to be, maybe it's only 24 pages, maybe it's 74, maybe it's 174. That is going to change the costs, of course, dramatically, the type of options of book that you can make as well. So this is when it gets a lot more dicey and hairy as to what you're supposed to be doing. It's not as cut and dry as throwing it up on Drive-Thru or Itch, or even adding a print on demand option. As soon as you start making the physical books, a lot more discussion and thought process needs to go into this. So let's work with a 24-page zine right now, just to say, okay, we're going to put something small out as our first product. So if we're going to do a 24-page zine, it's typically standard printer size paper, maybe slightly thicker on the interior. And then a lot of times there's a more of a cover stock, thicker cover here. And something like that, they can be colored, they can be black and white. That's going to change the cost, of course. But even color and the thickest cardstock, that is not something that's going to cost you, more than a few dollars a book maximum, even if you only print a few 20 copies or something. So, you're going to be able to sell that physical zine for something around $10 or $15 and still make money. So, thinking of things that way, and thinking about the amount that you're going to charge and then the amount that it costs, doing like a saddle stitch zine is a pretty reasonable, easy option, which is probably why you see so many people doing it. Then, if you say, "Ooh, this is a thicker book, it's too big, to saddle stitch," then you're looking at what they call perfect bound, which is what you'll see in a lot of printer quote terminology. And that is when a lot of different options can come in. You can just do standard paper, black and white. You can do standard paper color. You can do glossy, shiny paper, full color. You can do a thicker cardstock, all kinds of things. Again, this is going to make the prices go all over the place. And that's something you're going to have to determine if it makes sense for your project to put that money into different things. But ultimately, even with color and all that stuff, for a fairly low minimum, not 50, maybe not 100 copies, but something below 1,000 copies, you can keep that cost to well under $5. And then you're able to sell it again, like we said, for maybe $10, $15 and still make some money on it. So that's still an option, but you're just going to have to be really careful about what options you would choose in a perfect bound book situation like that one. The nice thing about that is, you've got the actual cover here, so you can put that in. So if it's in a bookshelf, you can see which one it is, which is a nice little feature, and it's a little more durable than the zine as well. So again, think about what makes sense for your project, but that is going to be probably a little bit more expensive, definitely heavier as well. So you're going to have the cost of everything being shipped to you, right? From the printer, and then you're going to have to ship it out to people as it gets sold, or as a store wants to carry it, or something else that we'll get into later. So you want to think sometimes too about, it's going to cost me, it's called $250 a book, but then it's going to cost me $300 to ship all the books to me. So now you need to say, okay, well, I need that $300, and I need to take the 250, the 100 books I got, let's say, and take $300 and divide that by 100, and it's like, ooh, that's actually adding a lot of dollars to my cost of my book, right? So you got quoted $250 for the book, but then the shipping added up more money on there, right? So that's something you got to think about. That's actually your cost of your book. And then when you go to sell it, however you're going to sell it later, there's going to be costs for shipping to customers, of course, which you could, of course, have them pay. But there's going to be a lot of other avenues where you can ship physical products to other sites, and that is not going to include the shipping being paid for by them. So these are things you want to be thinking about. So some advice I have as we kind of think through this pricing a little bit is you want to be able to see if you can make a print run or amount of books, whatever we want to call it, probably for the fewest that you can possibly make, because you don't want to dump a bunch of money into this and then be sitting on 500 books, right? If you're able to say, okay, I can do 100, it's going to cost me $4 a book. Well, if 300 costs you $4 a book too, or $3.75 a book, it's not really enough savings to buy so many books at once. So if you're able to reorder another 100 books in 2 months or 3 months or 6 months, great. And typically a lot of these places where you can buy zines, saddle stitch books, or even perfect bound books don't have a very long delivery. I know in the US, I'm assuming it's the same in Canada, UK, and wherever your country is, that if you're with a local printer, it's probably not going to take more than 4-ish weeks to get something made, especially if we're only talking about 100 units, right? So you can be planning, okay, I have 100 now, and as I'm looking at my sales for the last 3 months, looks like I'm down to 33. I better reorder. Or, I still have 70. I'm good for a while. And that's something that you would need to be keeping an eye on if you're going to just be buying these small amounts. It's the easiest way to save yourself money and not get into a bind, but it is something that you need to be diligently looking at maybe every month at least, or possibly even more if you see the numbers going down pretty quickly. So that's one piece of advice, is see how low your first print run can be if you're going to print, and get a lot of quotes. There's a lot of printers out there. Local printers do books and pamphlets and things all the time. So it doesn't have to be a book printer per se. There's a lot of local printers in your area probably that would do this kind of work. As far as some big names that you might want to look at, is there's a company called Mixam, M-I-X-A-M, that I know is in the UK and the US, and they do zine, saddle stitching, and perfect bound. And I just found out they do hardcover books too. So I encourage you to go on there, and if nothing else, just get a quote from them, which you can do without talking to anyone. You can put all of your parameters in and kind of get a baseline price. That would be good to have for when you then go to your local printer or another printer to see if you're in the right ballpark. Because if this one online is saying, okay, it should be $3.50 a book, and you're getting quoted $7 somewhere else, okay, that is not correct. You need to get more quotes. But if you're getting, something in the same realm, then that's letting you know this is about what this is going to cost. This is not, out of the realm of possibility for you to sell for $10 or $15, for example. I know my local printer in Philadelphia we use is called Fireball Printing, and their zine saddle stitch pricing is very comparable to Mixam, but their perfect bound books are not. It's not as reasonable. So we've used them for example, this book is from Fireball, but this one is from Mixam. I've also done this other odd little zine quest thing we did, which are saddle stitches. Those are also from Mixam. So I've done a bunch of different things from both of those printers, and the quality is pretty comparable. It really just came down to the price. So those are two options that I would say, is look for your local printers and then try someone like a Mixam just as a baseline to get an idea on if these bigger national or international printers are actually going to give you the price that you're looking for. Basically at the end of the day, when it comes to, advice on the print run, is you're the designer, you want to get your game out there. So whatever you feel you need to do to get your game out there the quickest, assuming it's done, right, is what you should do. So if you're really feeling bogged down by the money and the print run, and the stress of all of this, then start out digitally. It doesn't mean that you're any less of a designer because it's only available digitally. So, that's something that I suggest if you are getting overwhelmed or having issues with the money part of this, do the digital first, and you can always print it. There's no rule saying you cannot. And then if you are saying, no, I am ready, I am going to do this, then there's a lot of questions you need to ask yourself. But, if you're ready to go ahead and put it out there, do it. Putting it out there is the most important thing. So we've talked kind of at this point through the ways to actually publish the game. So I'm just going to do a little recap because I said a lot of things, and then we'll kind of talk about where you go next. So digitally, easiest one you can do. Of course, you can always put all this on your website, but Itch and Drive-Thru are great marketplaces for that. Print on demand, again, there's some services that you could do you're on your own. Amazon actually probably does it. And then I know Drive-Thru RPG actually does it. And then, of course, you could do a physical printing where you would either get a zine, saddle stitch, or a perfect bound book made. And that print run is going to vary on amounts, depending on your project, your budget, and what type of minimum the printer might have. So you're going to have to assess all this yourself, but basically those are your easiest and best options as a small TTRPG publisher at this point. But it's not just making the book, right? Once that book is made, hopefully you've already got a market for this book and people know it's coming out, right? But, really, a lot of your sales are going to come after that book is out and it's available in the world, right? So we've talked through the digital. I'm going to kind of stop talking about the digital now because we know those marketplaces where they can be sold. But if you've got physical products, there's a lot less options out there, and there's a lot more work you need to do to make sure that these things sell, right? Consignment type of places, you may have heard of Indie Press Revolution, are out there. And what they do is they will take a certain number of your books, maybe 10, maybe 20, and they will hold on to them and list them on their marketplace on their site. And they will probably also offer a digital version. But the physical versions, when they sell them, you'll get paid. So they do take a cut, but again, aside from shipping them those 10 or 20 books, you don't have to do anything. So that's really, really nice. There's a little bit of setup work, of course, just to put the information about the book. But other than that, once it's out there, they're doing all of that work and you can go about your daily life, which is really, really nice. It's also a place that people who want independent RPGs go. So it's a specific self-selected market of people that want that kind of thing. They're not going there to get the new D&D book or Pathfinder. They're going there to get what's the new thing that came out. What's this odd thing I never heard of? I have no idea what this is. I'm going to check it out. That's Indie Press Revolution. And I highly, highly suggest any physical zines or RPGs that you have that you reach out to them. Another consignment like site is Exalted Funeral. So Exalted Funeral is a place where they sometimes do their own designs. They will do Kickstarter fulfillment and distribution as well, a little bit, but also they have a marketplace online where you can list your games. Now, in my experience, which has been over a year since I worked with them, so I can't say for sure, but I'm pretty sure what they do is they buy the books. There's no payments later. Basically, they say, I'm going to take 20 books and I'm going to sell them on my site. So that's, in my experience, how it was. I'm not sure if that's how it's going to be, but again, it's another place that's a self-selected indie RPG market that would potentially like your stuff. So if you aren't familiar, go check out Exalted Funeral. We talked through Drive-Thru, we talked through Itch, so I'm going to skip over those right now and go a little bit into some other options that you could have. You could, of course, sell on your own website, and you could, of course, sell in person at shows or local zine fairs or craft fairs. But, again, that's going to put a lot of the onus on you, of course, and a lot of your time is going to be spent trying to make sales if that's the only way you do it, right? So other options you have are to try to get into standard distribution, which is not easy, or reach out to local and or not local retail stores that you think would be interested in stocking this and trying to get them to stock it. And again, this is also not easy. So looking at what we just talked about, something like Itch and Drive-Thru, really easy. IPR and Exalted Funeral, pretty easy. Easier to get your stuff into. Your website and in person, easy to get your stuff there, but you have to do a lot of work. And then at stores or in actual distribution, a lot of work and harder to do, right? So thinking through all of that, it's definitely always best to start small, but those are kind of your options for the ways you can sell your game once it's out there. Let me see if I'm thinking of anything else. Yeah, I did forget to mention this. So the other thing is, when you are lucky enough to get into distribution or are lucky enough to get retail orders, typically you get paid right away. People say, I'm going to take 20 copies, and they pay you at wholesale or less for distribution because they need to then sell it to the consumer at the actual store, right? So you're going to sell possibly more than you would to one, customer at a show, but you're going to be selling it at wholesale, which is 50% of MSRP in the case of a retail store. And if you're going to be in standard distribution, meaning you may have heard of these people, maybe not, ACD, Alliance, Asmodee is now one, where they are selling to the stores, you're even going to make less than wholesale. It's probably going to be closer to like you get 40% or maybe 35% of the MSRP. So that's something to think about. It's what a lot of the big companies, especially board game companies, do, but you're making a lot less money and it's a lot harder to get into. So don't feel like you didn't make it if you're not in distribution or even at a lot of local stores, because that's actually going to be a lot of work for you too. So you can get to that when you've got more games out or more time to focus on that. So my suggestion is, sell on your site, sell in person, get into these sites like Indie Press Revolution and Exalted Funeral. And then regardless of if you print or don't, sell the digital on Itch and Drive-Thru and your site as well. Always selling the digital it's not technically free money, but it's pretty close to free money. You've already done the work. It's sitting there as a file. Someone clicks by and they get it. And then there's money deposited in your account. So it's pretty good. So that's definitely something, regardless of how you come to market, still sell digitally out there. Let's see here. Now we've went through making the game and publishing it. So it's out, it's for sale now. We talked about where you could list it aside from your own site. So now it's out there. However, in some of these cases, it's not as simple as it's out of my hands, right? You actually have to fulfill the product to the customers sometimes. So if you're going to be selling this on your website or on some other type of site, possibly like an Amazon store where you're going to be doing the fulfilling, it's not quite as cut and dry, unfortunately, as it used to be 5 years back, because a lot of shipping has changed. A lot of regulations have changed between the US and Europe, the US and UK, UK and Europe, Canada and the US. It's like way different than it used to be. So, so anytime that you're working with having to ship overseas or even ship within your own country, it can kind of start to get stressful. So something you're going to want to learn about and think about is how are you going to fulfill an order if you get a direct order on your website or something similar like that, or a game store that wants to buy your stuff, right? You still have to ship it to them. So these are things that you want to think about. And maybe you know this, but I'm just going to go over this. If you're in the US and you're shipping to the US, zines, books, and RPGs are media mail. And media mail is much cheaper than standard US postage. So that is a nice bonus where you can probably send something up to £1 and it's only going to cost you maybe $3. Where if it was a book, or not a book, a box game, card deck, dice that was about £1, it would probably cost between $8 and $14, depending on where you're shipping to and from in the US. So first off, that's something you want to be thinking about. Luckily, it is cheaper for through media mail, but you still want to make sure you're charging enough shipping on your website and making sure you're collecting taxes on your website and things like that. So these are just things to be aware of when you're doing that type of work. And if you're shipping out of your own country, then there's also going to be customs forms, and sometimes duties are charged. And that's going to be just another level of education that you need and possible stress on you. So it's something that you want to think about, are you ready for that? And do some research before offering it maybe out of your own country. And then you have the other option. Maybe you don't want to deal with it. That's fine. There are fulfillment services. So you can say, I'm selling on my website, I get orders, and you hire a fulfillment service that gets your daily orders and they ship them out. And all you normally have to do, aside from, of course, pay them a fee, is ship them X number of your products. So maybe keep 25 in stock or 50 in stock there. And every time an order comes in, they take care of it. So it's a really nice option, but it does cost money and you are going to be making less on each sale. So you're going to have to determine if that's worth it. If you're not seeing a lot of sales per week or month and you think you can handle the amount of work, I highly suggest doing that, especially as a smaller company or designer, because you're going to save yourself a lot of money. It is a little more stressful and it is going to take some time for you to have to go to the post office and things like that. But it is ultimately going to save you the most money, and you'll eventually learn the correct things to do and get much more savvy at all of that, which is exactly what I did. It took me a long time to figure it out. And as all of the things with customs and that changed, it was rough, but now I've gotten through that. So if you've been hearing about Brexit and VAT and not understanding what that all means, the one good thing to know is that books do not get charged VAT. So if you're only doing an RPG zine or book, you will not have to worry about that being charged on that product if you are going to a country that would normally charge VAT. So that's good news. What else? Okay, so we've published a game. We found places to sell the game. We're comfortable with how we're going to get that game to the customer ultimately. It's not done yet, unfortunately. We now have to tell people that this exists, right? We have to market ourselves. We have to market the game. So, it's out there. Sure, there's passive people finding it without it, you doing any work, and you're probably going to get a few sales that way, but that's not the way you're going to be extremely successful. So I want to go over just a couple of high-level marketing tips that you probably already know, but it's just something I want to point out that why it's so important. So if you don't have a website or you don't sell on your website and you weren't planning to sell on your website, that's okay. But it's still important to have a place you can point people to either find out what you're doing or get in touch with you or see who you are, right? So having a very basic website or blog is a good idea. But if at the very least, you need to have a pretty good social media presence, right? That you can point people to that. So if I'm hearing about your game on Drive-Thru or Itch, I might be thinking, who is this person? I want to look up who they are. So if you don't have any internet presence, that might cause some people to think, I'm not sure if this is for me. I don't know who this person is, right? So just having that out there kind of legitimizes you a little bit, and it gives you a place to interact with your potential fans, and of course spread the word about your game. Surprisingly, you know, maybe you do or don't know this, networking is a really good form of marketing. You find out what's going on, where to post, where to sell, what conventions are going on, if there's design contests, if there's, you know, whatever conversations going on about a topic that your game is about, right? You're going to hear about that more if you're networking within the community. Zine quests and Kickstarters and things like that are actually forms of marketing. It's not just for funding. Some people kind of forget this sometimes, but doing a Kickstarter is a marketing campaign, not a sales campaign. It's slightly different because you have to try to get people excited to go there, and you're basically spreading the word about your game. And sometimes, unfortunately, it is less about how good the game is and more about how cool the marketing was. But doing a zine quest, doing a small Kickstarter is actually a really good way to get the word out about who you are. And if nothing else, you can also do a sale on drive-through or on your own site, or you can do, as they call it, jam on itch. And these are just ways to have something to talk about that isn't just buy my game, right? You could say, oh, look, there's this cool jam we're doing. Oh, look, there's this sale this weekend only on cat games, and I have a cat game, for example. So stuff like that is usually a good reason to kind of spread the word around. And then another thing you can do is submit your existing game for charity bundle giveaways, design contests, or other awards, maybe that kind of thing. So an example of a charity bundle would be a humble bundle on drive-through, where you can list your digital game as part of this big bundle, and some of the proceeds go to whichever charity it is. A design contest that I can think of is, I'm gonna, you know, toot my own horn here a little bit, but we have a thing called Level 1 that won the gold ENnie, actually. And this is an indie RPG anthology that we do every year, and we publish indie designers in there. And it could be a game that exists. It can be a game that you're going to sell later. So that's another way to get your game out there. And, you know, if there's something like an ENnie or IGDN Indie Groundbreaker Award, maybe you're eligible based off what your game's about. So submit to those type of things. It cannot hurt. You know, and then now you've marketed it. Hopefully you're selling it. And now you need to sustain this, right? This is going to just keep going, right? So once your game is done and you've done all the work, your work's not done, unfortunately. You know, you want to continue to like remind people about this game, or maybe you need to do another print run or whatever's going on. Now you're thinking about a sequel, who knows? So all of this is just going to perpetually kind of keep going, and you're going to get better at it as, you know, as you continue to go. So just be aware that once it's out there, your work is not done, but it's going to become more part of your daily life, and you're going to get better at doing the business end of things. And then just one last quick thing I had, just kind of as a reminder, is that, you know, unfortunately, making a living or a lot of profit as a TTRPG indie designer is really not the assumption. And it's really more about getting your work out there. I can't tell you how many people hoard and hide their work for a lot of years. And then once they finally put it out there, are like, wow, people really like this. They really responded to this. And now they might have 4 titles out, right? So just getting it out there, it not only shows people your work, it also kind of eases your nerves about what it's like to get things out there. Once it's out there, you typically do feel better about the fact that it's out there, and are much more comfortable continuing to put out more games. So with that, Sen, I'm not sure if we're ready for questions, but that's pretty much where I'm at.
You know, I think we're always ready for questions.
Sure.
Hey, welcome back to me. I'm back in the feed. So we have some people in the feed watching right now. And if they have any questions, they are more than welcome to type them into the chat and we will get them up. As we're doing that, just for edification, can you define what a zine is?
Sure. Sorry, I just assumed we would know. I mean, a zine is, and I'm going to grab this one as an example. A zine is something much more small like this. It typically, I mean, I guess if you want to go with old school rules, it should be all one color and black and white and all this DIY and all this stuff. Zines, as we know now with Zine Quest, are a little bit fancier, but typically what they are is they're not these epic works of 400-page RPGs. They are small, encapsulated, interesting ideas in a small form factor. That's typically what it is. It doesn't have to be a saddle stitch. This is just kind of the most common looking zine. And they typically are about a topic like maybe it's an RPG itself. Maybe it's more of a fan zine, like magazine. Maybe it's a list of, punk rock outfits. Maybe it's, there's all kinds of different things that it could be, an anarchist handbook or something like that, back in the day. But, now the last few years of Zine Quest, it's mostly been role-playing games that have kind of gravitated to this zine format. And we are much more open with what that can be now, what that can
right.
Yep.
Yeah, so it's usually maybe 20 to 30 pages, something that people can do very DIY, whether it's photocopying and hand stitching or stapling with a big old stapler.
Right.
It can be any of those things. Heather's video is unfortunately frozen right now, so we'll get her audio, but I don't know what's going on with her video.
I don't know.
I don't know.
Let's
see.
Now
we have your icon, but not your face. And now she's not connected at all. So it's just me talking, and that's awkward. But we'll get back with Heather. I think she's coming back in. There she is. Hey, Heather.
I guess I can the connection for a second there.
Yeah. We put up the links for Mix'em, and we also put up the links for IPR and Exalted Funeral. And so those are all good places to go to look for, how to make something.
Yep.
Can you print this out with a printer instead of doing it at Staples and then hand bombing it all together yourself? Right. Mix'em does a lot of good stuff across most English-speaking countries. So the UK, US, Australia, Canada.
Yeah,
they all have Mix'em sites. So you can get it in a decent currency format for you, probably. Yeah. So that makes sense anyway. Hatchling DM was mentioning that not Indie RPG, but Indie Press Revolution, provides a service where they will sell your products at conventions. Cuts fairly steep, but it's sometimes better than you getting your own booth, because booths are really expensive and then you have to staff them the whole time.
Yeah, no, it's actually, it's funny I didn't even think about that, because I use them at Gen Con this year, because they were like, hey, we're going to sell your stuff. And I thought, well, even though I have a lot of titles and I'm not just starting out, a booth at Gen Con is very expensive. So it was really nice to have them do that. So good point.
Yeah. I forgot. And I've also seen people do both.
Oh, yeah.
Because a lot of people go to IPR, the booth, just to see what's there.
Yep.
Because they know they're going to get a smorgasbord of wild and weird stuff. But if they go to one specific publisher's booth, they're only getting that specific publisher's stuff. What they're serving. So it's a little bit different, right?
Yep.
Yeah, Zine Quest is a thing that is run kind of in a very set month-ish type idea.
Yep.
And Angry Nerd Girl is saying that perhaps it's going on until the end of this month, in August till September.
Yep.
And then normally it's usually in February. So it all depends. It's kind of like NaNoWriMo or any of those month things that, it's in a month, do this thing.
Yeah, Kickstarter did say they're going back to February starting next year. And from what I heard, they might be doing it twice a year now, but they're definitely going back to February next year. Yep.
Yeah. Let's see. Here's a question from Donald Kelly. Donald asks, for print on demand, If there are quality control issues, is that something that the customer has to handle directly with the sourcing site, like Drive-Thru or Lulu or whatever?
Yeah, well, that does happen sometimes. So they would report the issue, right? Because you as the designer might not see this happen, right? So the customer gets it. There's some issue.
Yeah,
Um,
like the stitching is
the
off or
stitching is
something.
off. There's a page with the
Yeah, I'm missing
it's
completely.
all wrong or something, right? So typically you would get notified that there's this issue, but yeah, usually the service like Drive-Thru would remedy that for that customer, and typically you wouldn't be involved, but you might know it's happening, right?
Yeah.
um, so it is nice, again, you're paying this Drive-Thru or Lulu for this service, so they are handling that for you. But if you do see that happening all the time, maybe that's when you say, I maybe should print this myself and not do print on demand anymore if you're having a lot of issues.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Peter Lacara asks, what is your, Heather, favorite POD vendor?
Well, I don't know many, so I was going to say Drive-Thru RPG is one, and I know, of course, you can print on demand on Amazon. So Drive-Thru RPG seems to be working well for people.
Mm-hmm.
I've heard, though, that just because of everything being delayed with printing, that it has been taking longer and longer to get books through Drive-Thru RPG print on demand. However, from the limited source that I know, that would probably be my preferred option.
Right. So for people who don't have your ears to the ground on what's happening in the world at the moment with supply chains and things like that, it's easier in general. I think Hatchling DM was talking about, what are board game people doing? We're waiting an awful lot because there's a lot of stuff within board games that is very difficult to source and manufacture and ship right now. Whereas a lot of times you can get books done fairly local to you, but they still need paper. And so paper is a big commodity right now, so big that, we've had companies that have bought into paper futures because they need the access to the stock. There's no way that, you could print several thousand copies of a multi-hundred page books without having reserve of paper. And so it's this weird thing where sometimes the printer doesn't have the capacity, but has the stock, or the printer has the capacity, but no stock. And so you have to kind of make it all align, which is where POD actually comes into a good situation in some ways, because they'll almost never be bombarded by, having to print 7,000 copies at once.
Right.
Usually, even on like Drive-Thru, like a platinum selling thing on Drive-Thru is actually not that many copies. Right. It seems like a big deal because it's platinum, but it's not 100 billion copies.
And it's also all time, right? It's not within a month. It's like maybe they've been listed for 15 years,
Yeah.
So, you got to think about that. Take some of this stuff with a grain of salt. But yes, there's a lot of delays going on in printing in general. So print on demand is not a bad option. And unless you can do something local where you're pretty open to different options on paper, and just kind of be open to the fact that what you might envision might take 12 weeks or 18 weeks or 18 months, right? Mm-hmm. So you might want to look at other options that you could have.
Yeah. And I mean, what Heather's saying about throughput is an entirely plausible thing, where a company, a manufacturer might be able to publish or manufacture your book, but they can only do X number of copies a month.
Yep.
So that's a thing you have to think about too. Hashling DM asks, says, "Hi Heather, thank you for your insights. Is there a way to approach large retailers such as Waterstones here in the UK, which I guess would be sort of like our Barnes and Nobles-ish type stuff, I guess, when you don't have a recognized publisher representing you?"
Well, I mean, there is a way. How effective is that way, right? So, there's a couple things that I've done. Again, I've reached out just via email, hey, to the local store contact, or gone into the store and asked. Now, something like Waterstones, I'm assuming if there's multiple locations, you're going to walk in and the person there is not the decision maker who's buying for all the other stores, right? So you can go to a local, maybe it's a large game store, but there's one store, the owner is the owner, or the buyer is the buyer. You're going to make much more headway than trying to go into something that has 100 stores, 1,000 stores, and they have a buyer that works in corporate, that is going to be so much harder to be effective. You're going to do better going to the smaller stores and making a personal connection, showing them your game, showing them why it's good. And I think I know your game, so I know it is good. And, so this would be the kind of thing where you could start that way. And then by either getting yourself into actual standard distribution, if you're selling enough, or having enough footing where you're selling enough that you could say, hey, this game's popular. We're in our second 10,000 print run or something, or 5,000 print run, it's stocked in all these stores. You have to tell them why they want it, because they're going to be looking for, why should they stock every game they get contacted about? So I still say do it. I'm just saying it's going to be a lot harder than going to a local game store that has one owner or one buyer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's very important that when you're pitching anything to anybody, you pitch it to somebody who can actually make a decision, or has ties directly to that person who can make a decision or can bring it back to them. And then you just have to make sure that you're pitching it well enough that they can pitch it to the person that has to actually make the decision, right?
Yep.
And you're right. Hatchling DM is saying that they need numbers first. Like nothing moves a buyer's heart like numbers.
Right. And the thing is, now, if you're going to a small one store, talking to the buyer, they're probably also a gamer. But if you're going to a corporate America level buyer, they don't even know about these games. They're just looking for numbers. They're looking for award winning. They're looking for press. That's what they want to know. They don't want to know that this game is a cool RPG. That's not enough for them, right? They want numbers.
No, unfortunately, no.
Unfortunately, yeah. Yeah.
It's not an if you build it, they will come situation. It's a, can you prove that this is sold in the past? And then they're going to ask themselves some hard questions like, well, is that the end of this life for this game? Is that all that this can sell?
Yep.
Right. Because if you sell like 10,000 copies of something, that may be it.
Right.
That may be it. And that's great. But if they see, well, but you've never sold it in mass market or whatever, and there's potential for more people to buy it, they have to see the potential. That's really it. And numbers are a big part of that. So we're always asked to, like, can you show us how many numbers? And sometimes it's number of backers on Kickstarter. Sometimes it's dollar value. Sometimes it's how many units have been sold, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And that's the thing. Like, if you go to a local bookstore and they tell you that their staff plays RPG, that's great. You found your people, right? And you'll probably be able to get certain number of units in there on either on consignment or whatever.
Yeah, that's definitely your best bet. And, once you've been doing that for a while, you might be able to get yourself into distribution, or like a smaller distributor like PSI or Flat River Group in the US, where, you don't have to be Asmodee level or Hasbro level. So look into those. If you are starting to see a lot of sales in your local bookstores and you're just having trouble getting to like Target and Waterstones and Barnes and Noble, then, maybe it's time for you to think about going into distribution.
Yeah. The other thing to look at in distribution is consolidators. Consolidators are kind of this sub-level of distributors. Mm-hmm. So the reason why companies want to go to distributors is because they just want one source. They like, I'm going to order 16 of my 20 products from this one source. I know all their SKUs. I know who to contact. Make it easy on me. I get one package or one box, one set of packages from that person. They know me. They know how we do business. They know the dates that I have everything on. Boom, we're done for a good like 80% of my product or whatever. They don't want to have to go to individual sellers. They want to have to go to like a clearinghouse. And so how some of the smaller sub distributors, consolidators is what they're called, what they can do for you is if you just have one SKU, like one product, almost no distributor will want to talk to you. Even if that is like this major thing that won multiple awards, they still might not want to talk to you because it isn't efficient for them. There's no money in it for them to have one SKU. They want to hold multiple SKUs. But consolidators will do the work because they are taking less from more people.
Yep.
As opposed to more from less people. And then some consolidators work underneath larger distributors and will as a thing gets more successful at a consolidation level, we'll funnel it up into proper distribution. So there you go. Those are some other answers for you. So like Hit Point Press, the Hit Point Consolidation, which is not Hit Point Press, they're two different things. And some other consolidators that exist may be something to look into, where they are able to get you into bigger markets, but by being small, and then hopefully be able to elevate you through to full distribution, because a lot of them are subunits of a full distribution house. They're part of Fun a Game. So that particular one, a Hit Point Consolidation. So yeah, lots of answers, lots of questions. Any advice on getting your games into libraries or other community resources? Oh, that's a great question. I love that.
Good question. Yeah, actually, I've been dealing with we would get a lot of requests from libraries, and we realized that libraries actually have a budget to buy games. Okay, libraries don't just have all donations and that's how they get all these books. They actually have budgets, and there are library conventions that I've gone to, and they're also awesome. But not everybody can do those. But yes, libraries have budgets, and what you can do if you've got a game is you can either contact or go to the local library and ask who the person is that's going to purchase that. And a lot of times what they'll do is, if this is something maybe that's going to hit their teen group, or maybe their RPG group, or their gaming group, they're going to take one maybe, and then they're going to see if it fits, and then they might buy 6 or 8 to put into circulation. So getting into that kind of thing is a really good idea. And let's say you have a community center or like a youth center, that's another good place where, maybe they don't have quite as big of a budget as a library does, but that's another place that you might not be thinking of that would be interested in taking your games.
Mm-hmm. There's a lot of places that need games, like community centers, libraries, like you're saying, but different like game libraries, even like for conventions and things like that, might want a copy of your game. So I mean, some of these are going to be lost leaders, where it's like, okay, I hope I give this, it cost me $3 to make this. I hope that it results in a couple sales.
Yeah.
Right.
Exactly.
And I think it's a little bit different with RPGs, because RPGs are very like, there's a long kind of, I got to learn how to play this game, which is different than board games, where it's like, okay, in 40 minutes, I should be able to learn and play this game. But I think in a long form library, or if you're doing small things like zines and whatnot, those are typically games that you can like learn to play very quickly. Or they might be one pagers. If you have one pagers, give those away. Just get people playing games, even like high school clubs, after school clubs at middle school, church groups, if they allow that. I don't know. There's all sorts of avenues for you to explore for, giving your product away. I know a shoe-in for me is, if I want a product and that product is also saying, and, for the low cost of X, we'll also donate a copy to a youth group. It's like, yeah, 100% I'm in for both, right? I'm that kind of person that will get my copy and gladly give another copy to a youth group or a library or a game store or whatever. So publishers are offering that in their Kickstarters. You've just made another sale for me, because I'm that kind of person. There's a lot of people like me who just want games to be out there. So lots of good stuff. Any other questions?
One thing I was thinking about when it comes to libraries is anyone who owns a lot of RPGs probably knows this, is a lot of your RPGs are for you to read and less for you to play, right? So because you just can't get them all to the table. So, it's definitely not a bad idea, because you're going to have maybe that alpha RPG person that's going to read it and say, wow, this is like really cool. Like, now I need to own it and bring this to my friends. So, that's where you can make an impact by donating these in there, even if they don't get a chance to play.
Yeah. And even game stores, they, if you donate a copy or you teach people how to play it at the game store, more people are more likely to at least pick it up or give it a look, or the staff is more likely to recommend it if they've played it, right? So I think any of these are a good use of your time, to spend playing your game with people, promoting through play, as opposed through, through marketing or, sales sheets or something like that. I think the organic way for RPGs is really a nice feel to it as well, because then you get to know your community and your people. So
Yeah, it's a form of networking too, because you end up meeting
Mhm.
a game store, you've played a game with them, you have this connection now. Now you go in there, that maybe that guy knows you, the owner knows you, the other person who only works weekends, sees you, and now you know them, and they're just going to be a little more like willing to be like, I'm going to pretend it's Sen. I love Sen. I love that
Who
game
doesn't?
he ran for me, and I'm gonna recommend this game. Or we ran out of those 3 copies, we should order more, and I'm gonna ask him next time he comes in. So it's gonna be a little more top of mind, and they're gonna understand your game more, they're gonna understand where you're coming from.
Mhm.
Again, it's a lot of time sometimes to do this multiple places, but it's a better use of your time, and definitely costs you nothing but time to do this. And so if you don't have the money to be putting into other avenues, and probably you shouldn't be spending money on marketing anyway, these are better served marketing techniques for sure.
Yeah, and then you could have like a book signing. You could have,
Mhm.
meet the designer days, and
Yep.
it is kind of somewhat sad when it's like only 3 people come, but that's okay.
Yeah.
So like 3 people who are so hyped to meet you, it'll
Yeah.
actually probably make your day.
Yeah. No.
Be happy with the 3 people that do come, right?
Yes. Exactly. Yeah. Awesome.
Excellent, excellent, excellent. Well, you know what? I think that is kind of it. Just gonna make sure that we don't have any other things that we're missing here. I think we're pretty good. All right. Yeah, and Hatchling DM is just saying if you're a wannabe designer, reading as many established RPGs as possible is the way to go, right? So there you go. I mean, we went into making Avatar Legends fully knowing that, a good percentage of people will only just look at it and
Hey,
not play it.
okay. That's okay.
Yeah, and that's totally fine.
That's totally-
All right, so let me just see what we got to say before we leave. So the next the next thing in the speaker series. I'm sorry that our faces are still half under this. Hello, hi there. Is going to be Carrie Rundle McIver, and she is coming to us with the slant of being a manufacturer. So she is going to talk to us about designing with manufacturing in mind, and perhaps even eco-conscious manufacturing. So being thoughtful about how our games might impact the environment. And that will likely happen September 3rd, 6 p.m. Eastern Time. All right. So on that note, Heather and I will say goodbye.
Bye. Thanks,
All
everybody.
right. We'll see you all later. Thanks for coming. Bye. Thank you.